Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Chris, and today I wanted to talk about again something serious, which is the Ukraine situation. Now, it's always mixed emotions these days with the Russians pulling back, most likely to regroup, to change objectives, to probably going more after the south and consolidating there. Today, the big news was that apparently there were atrocities committed by the Russian military in Bucha in northern Ukraine. From what it sounds like, the Russian military or soldiers within there, ended up executing a good number of civilians, creating mass graves for people. And now that the towns are being liberated, the stories of what was going on during those times is coming to light, and it really makes me think of how these situations. I mean, myself, I've never been in combat, so I know a lot. Many of you have, served in the military or had combat experience. And I can imagine that in that environment, it's not like operating in your normal everyday life. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of tension, a lot of stress from being under the yoke of those conditions. And I've always wondered too, if because think about real life, think about your everyday life. There are certain people that just cannot handle stress. That just can't. That if this person was put in an actual real stressful situation, that they lose it. And I've always wondered if in the military or in those types of environments, I would think that those ideally those people get weeded out at some point. But I don't know. Obviously, I'm 100% confident that there are plenty of those people who don't get weeded out, that do serve. Just like everything else, there's the saying "bad apples" is not a good. I don't like that because when they say, "Oh, it's just a few bad apples," well, the other saying is one bad apple ruins the barrel. So it's very interesting when you think about these kind of things, and I've always wondered. I'm sure our own forces have had their issues. We know they have. I mean, there was that one guy in Afghanistan who killed a bunch of people, and went to prison. But I'm sure those things happen in our own military. But as far as the culture of other militaries, obviously with Syria and like other places, even Afghanistan before it, Russia's kind of had this reputation of being kind of ruthless and very cavalier about killing civilians or things like that. If for whatever reason, I mean, can you make a good reason to do that kind of stuff? But on the other side, I mean, in reality, especially when there's a hostile populace, we don't know the things that could have happened. Maybe they were getting attacked by partisan bands or things like that, and then just lost it, where there's just like everybody's a combatant. I could see that kind of thing, right? I mean, we could all see like where you don't know who the enemy is, so basically everyone becomes the enemy at that point. It's not right, but I could see from a logical standpoint how that kind of thing could happen. On the same token, when the civilians are telling you, like the people in the town are telling you, no, like, this was my husband, or, going outside to get firewood and, getting shot, or, being told, don't scream or I'm gonna, shoot you, and then they shot him anyway, or things like that. Crazy. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is like, during the first days of something like this, there's that energy, that righteous energy of like, yes, good will defeat evil, and of course we tend to put the Russians in the evil category for the most part, as they are the aggressors in this case. I mean, it is what it is, just like we've been the aggressors many times. Well, I wouldn't say aggressors, let's say occupiers many times. But when you think about things like this, in the Russian military, if there's no accountability for that kind of stuff, is if it's seen as this is just par for the course, you know, where does it go from there? I mean, to me, it seems, like I said, pretty clear that it's hard. It's so hard because it's like you don't want to speak about something where it's like you have no idea what their objective is. But as a lay person looking at looking at Ukraine, looks like they've done a decent job of capturing the lower parts of Ukraine near the Black Sea, and looking at it, it would look like it makes sense to consolidate those gains and kind of take it from a precarious area of occupation to somewhere where it's like you have a solid grip on control. I mean, that doesn't seem like, again, doesn't seem like you need to be a member of the Russian general staff to kind of figure that out. Now, that being the case, obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of people fighting in southern Ukraine, a lot of military, Ukrainian military, down there, attacking, counterattacking, destroying logistics, those kind of things for the Russian military, destroying their logistics. But if you look at the map of kind of where everybody is, it looks like that city Dnipro would be an obvious target to kind of just cut off the southern half of Ukraine and have that whole Donbass and Luhansk, all that area just kind of consolidated. So again, as the armchair strategist, that's what looks like it would make sense. And then from there, you basically consolidate your power base and keep pushing forward from that position of strength. Now, if you know that, obviously I would assume that the Ukrainians are preparing for that kind of thing. But, when you see these kind of things like what happened in Bucha, it reminds you that it's not like a video game. It's not, it's real life. And this isn't like, for lack of a better way of saying, this isn't like a third world country. It's a first world country with, a high level of education according to our standards, and things like that, which people don't realize like how much that plays into everything that's going on, especially as far as the fighting. It's just very interesting dynamic. And I think, the thing with Ukraine versus someplace, like in the Middle East, where we've seen conflict so often, that the reason that it becomes more relevant is because it is right there in the middle of Europe. I mean, it's basically, on the doorstep of the Western nation, quote unquote, Western nations. And a human life is human life. At the end of the day, like, when people die, it's never a good thing. But looking at what's going on and knowing that most likely this is just the beginning of everything that's going to have to happen there. The bottom line for any of this is that it's going to have to be determined on the battlefield, not at the negotiating table. The negotiating will take form based on what happens on the battlefield. If Russia just turns into a quagmire where Russia cannot sustain, this whole thing, that's one thing. But if they do consolidate that lower region, I mean, Russia can call it quits at any time and just claim victory. I mean, that really is that simple. They could at any point and just say we accomplished our objective, because there's no clear objective. It's not they have a stated goal, but we would guess that his stated goal, as far as Vladimir Putin, is to take over all of Ukraine for the reasons that he's laid out many times. But it's just a terrible tragedy to see things like that. But at the same time, like when you see those things, and again, I know many people look at things like that and say it's disinformation, it's propaganda. I can understand that. And like I said, like when you look at things objectively versus just getting caught up in the emotional side, which is, of course, none of us like to see, innocent civilians harmed or things like that. But again, in a combat situation, I would assume that, if basically you don't know who the enemy is and you're constantly getting attacked, maybe you reach the level where, just everyone becomes the enemy. And like, I could see people like that, losing it and just, getting frustrated by those kind of things. In our military, my understanding is there's a clear mechanism for accountability. Is it 100%? I'm sure it's not. I wouldn't know. But for the Russian military, my understanding is they don't have accountability for that kind of thing. It's kind of seen as par for the course, which is pretty crazy in my mind. I mean, especially for a nation that considers itself to be a superpower. It was at one time. I don't know if it is anymore. And to me, this whole situation is just pushing it further and further from being that again. Who knows? I mean, these days, it's anybody's guess. But hopefully, you know, I know that this is going to be something we see more of because, again, it seems to be par for the course. But every time we do see it, it reminds us that it's a real situation over there. Real people are being affected. Anyway, that's it for right now. See you later.